presentation as well. So first, who I am. So I've been designing amplifiers and DA converters since '93, and I've started this HQ Player project in '98 and developing the DSP algorithms. Then after 10 years it was ready enough, so I started the company in 2008 and released first version of HQ Player. And then there have been, like, it was the first player software to play DSD, for example, on computers when the DSD capable DACs appeared on the market. So then this is the typical signal flow in different cases. So we start from this picture. So on the top is the traditional way to make productions with PCM. So you start with the analog source, you have delta sigma modulator in the ADC, and then it produces usually like 2 bits at 128 times the sampling rate. Then it has the PCM decimation filter that converts the delta sigma modulated bit stream to PCM, and then there's usually a DC block filter also, and then it comes out to the digital audio workstation. Or, and in this case, 96 kHz recording is pretty much standard these days. Then the second option that is quite common these days is to do it in DXD with merging paramix, which is the middle one. So you have the delta sigma modulation, you still have the same kind of PCM conversion, but it doesn't convert it as much down, so it keeps it at 352.8 kHz something like. But otherwise it's the same as PCM, and it's easy to work with on the workstation because it's the same kind of PCM data, just higher sampling rate. And then there's the way to make like pure DSD 256 recording, that you have just the delta sigma modulator and 1 bit output from it, and you feed it to the workstation or HQ Player Pro for like mastering and such. And that's more difficult to work with because it's more niche, so there's not so many tools on the market. Of course, PCM market is much bigger, so there are much more tools you can use there. So then, like last year, I was talking more about like the production chain. Now I talk more about why PCM is worse than DSD for the recording. So typical ADC decimation filter is not very good. It's somewhat leaky. These specifications I'm using are from the chips that is used, for example, in the RME ADI2 Pro. So it has 85 decibels of attenuation. So if there's some high frequency input, it leaks through. And even the sort of sharp filters that I'm using in this example are pretty slow roll-off because there's not much DSP resources inside the chip. And it leads to aliasing down to about 18 kHz. And then the decimation filters cause also time domain problems. They spread the energy because they need to do like brick wall bandwidth limiting. They spread the energy to wider time window. And also these DC block filters, which are typically IAR or similar, they also create phase errors for bass frequencies and so on. And then the analog components, of course, also create errors, and this is common for both cases. So whatever microphone preamps or whatever have distortion or similar. And inside, it's not feasible to fit a powerful DSP inside ADC converter chip because it will generate noise there, and it's like less than a millimeter away from the sensitive analog parts. So it's not good idea to put like powerful DSP there. So that's why they cut the corners quite a lot there and try to fit it there. So this is one example, and this is from the AKM ADC chip. Some examples. So in this case, if you record in 44.1 kHz, which is still quite common recording format, or produce Redbook with it, then you have the transition band from the upper limit is in 25.6 kHz, so it's way beyond the NUquist limit of 22.05, and it starts rolling off at 20 kHz, so it has 5 kHz wide transition band. What it means, now I was a bit lazy and used Cloud AI to give me this nice diagram. I could have done it took Cloud almost a day to produce it. I could have done it in a day, but now I could drink some Austrian wine while waiting for it to finish. So this shows the effect when with the decimation filter, and these specifications used for this are the same that are in the ADC chip. So in the middle you can see the transition band. So whatever goes beyond this yellow line in the middle, what goes above will fall down to the audio band below, and it reaches the maximum attenuation of 85 dB at 18 kHz. So whatever like drum hits or similar, it will spread down, and you have a lot of like erroneous signal in this in this 18 kHz to 22.05 kHz, because it's mixed with the actual signal that belongs there, and then the fall down from the higher frequencies. And like drums and such will produce spectrum up to like 100 kHz or at least 50 kHz, depending on the microphones and such. So and it will be high level also. So this creates then transient errors. So even if you don't really easily hear over 18 kHz frequencies, it messes up the transient response of how the drum hits should be, for example, in the time domain, and you notice that the drum doesn't sound correct, for example. Then this is another example from another brand. It has similar issue. So in this case, there's aliases down to 18.5 kHz. This is another commonly used popular professional audio recording ADC chip. And these graphs are just copied from the data sheets of the chip manufacturer.
And that's the problem in PCM?
Yeah, this is all the PCM pieces.
Okay.
And this is the latest chip on the market. I don't know any professional or any recording device that would be using this chip. This is the newest that has come. It still has similar issues. It's a little bit better, but it still has these same issues. So it will break the transients. And also there's quite a bit of passband ripple. Like in this, where it's fairly low, but it can be high as 0.1 dB, which creates a pre-echo on the sound. And then on the playback side, you have somewhat similar issues. So the DA converter chips are resource constrained. They don't have powerful DSP for the same reasons as ADC chips don't have powerful DSP inside. And then the digital filter there is also typically just 8 times. With most manufacturers, like practically all, be it AKM, ESS, whatever, So if you start with Redbook input, it only converts it up to 352.8 kilohertz rate, and then rest is done for usually by just copying the same sample multiple times, so-called sample hold or zero order hold function, which means that it creates image frequencies in the analog output at multiples of the 352.8 kilohertz sampling rate. And this I've shown many times on internet discussions from my measurements from the DA converter outputs. And then some chips use some other like linear interpolation, or for example, which is also a horrible way to up convert audio. And then these leaked images, especially from Redbook, the first images hit are just above the 22.05 kilohertz because the filter is a bit leaky there. These are usually half band filters to also save some DSP resources. And this matches the same frequencies where metal dome tweeters typically have a resonance peak. It can be high as 20 dB or 30 dB high resonance peak. So it's amplified by 20 or 30 dB in the tweeter output. So you get like high frequency noise from the tweeter output. And it causes intermodulation issues. Also, analog filters in DA converters are typically not efficient enough to remove these images around this 352.8 kilohertz, and as a result, it's also visible in the and exists in the final analog output of the DACs. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing a lot of, like when I'm developing software, I'm doing a lot of measurements from actual hardware. I have huge amount of DACs at the office, so I have practically all chips, DACs, all chips that are on the market in a couple of different DAC models, so I can see how they actually work in real life, and also I can test that my algorithms work as intended with actual hardware, because the DSP algorithms need to match the hardware correctly. So here are some examples of these DA converter chips where this light gray is the 44.1 kilohertz or 48 kilohertz filter response, and this is the result that comes out of the DA converter. Then in the top you see also the transition band, and then the red is the first image that is leaked, which is then hits, which is like inverse spectrum. This is like copy of the highest frequencies but moved up, and then it hits the, for example, the metal dome tweeter response, this resonance peak. There's zoom in on the top that shows this transition, and then in the bottom you see how the images appear at each multiple of 352.8 kilohertz, and it keeps going to higher frequencies, and I can measure from many DACs that they output to megahertz frequencies from the analog outputs. Depending on manufacturer, some have better analog filters, some less good ones. This is another DAC chip. Also the digital attenuation of the filter is not so high, but it's better than usually on the ADC side. So the solution for the DA converter side is to use to bypass this DSP section in the DA conversion altogether and go straight to the actual digital to analog conversion and not do any DSP there. And these are also from chip data sheets from different manufacturers. You can see that many support this direct DSD path, where you can bypass, by using DSD input, you can bypass these DSP blocks, and then you just get pure analog conversion from the data.
That's what we do here as well.
Yeah.
We send the bitstream DSD256 to the machine and it does just the conversion.
Yeah. And in HQ player, the digital filter always runs to the final actual sampling rate. So in this case, if we play Red Book, the digital filter runs to 11.2 megahertz. So it's 256 times digital filter. And in this case, it's really helpful that there are companies like NVIDIA who produce powerful GPUs that we can use for DSP. So that GPU can have like 5,000 processing units that can calculate things in parallel. So you have a lot of like affordable processing power available. So this is the full chain that usually happens when you listen to PCM is the top. So you have the Delta Sigma ADC, then you have the format and rate conversion, editing and mixing and mastering conversions, and then typically if you buy Red Book, it's converted down again to the final rate. Then you start playing it with traditional DAC, then you have another rate conversion and format conversion and Delta Sigma modulation, and then it goes out. So you have a lot of conversions on the path, first down and then back up. And with DXD, you don't go as much down in the sampling rate in the middle, so you have much less, for example, transient issues, but you still have various issues from the digital filters that you could avoid by doing what is shown on the at the bottom, which is the pure DSD path, where you record in DSD256. You don't do any rate conversions. If you do like, for example, with HQ Player Pro, you do like mixing and level adjustments. It's all processed at the original sampling rate, or it can be processed even at higher sampling rate than the original. So it can be processed, for example, at 24 megahertz, and then it goes out the Delta Sigma DAC, which is now used as just pure analog conversion and no DSP processing at all. So this is the idea, and we have these sample tracks also here that have been recorded in DSD256. No additional processing, and then we play it back as DSD256 through the system. So we have minimal number of processing conversions, such. So this is then one example. If you want to do room EQ, for example, to correct, or headphone EQ. I'm also using quite a lot of headphone EQs to correct headphones, because I do most of my listening with headphones, because I listen while I work. And in typical case, the DSP for doing the room correction is not very powerful, so it's converted down to, for example, 176.4 kilohertz sampling rate. Then it's processed as PCM there, and then it's converted back up. In HQ Player, you can process it at the original source rate. In this case, the source will be DSD64. You do the EQ processing, and you do the upsampling and the Delta Sigma remodulator, and the output is DSD256. There's no down conversion at all involved, only up conversion. And since we increase the sampling rate in this case, the noise floor also in the audio band drops down. So we have a lot of extra headroom for the DSP processing, because we can gain, like in this case, we can gain about 80 to 90 dB extra, for example, in the audio band So you can do a lot of DSP without worrying that you lose the signal to noise ratio.
And you can do it here as well in the HQ player for the room correction, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Loudspeaker correction, room correction, you just put the impulse file in the matrix and then it works in one step.
Yeah, everything goes in one step. And again, the powerful CPUs and GPUs are really helpful there, and it doesn't cost so much because NVIDIA of course produces a lot of GPUs for gaming and data centers and whatever, so they can make a chip with 50 billion transistors for reasonable cost. Okay, then any questions? If someone wants to ask.
Here you are talking mainly that you already have the source as DSD.
Mm.
And then you do your room correction or whatever, and the end is also a corrected DSD.
Yeah.
But the HQ player, isn't it also for converting PCM files to DSD?
Yes, that's the most typical case for HQ player, that these were the one when I showed. I go back to this one. So since a lot of content is still Red Book that people listen, it's not the perfect format. It's the most difficult format to deal with because it has so many problems. You need a lot of DSP and really careful. Like now, I spent almost 30 years to try to tame the problems and make most out of the pretty bad data that you can. So, for example, with apodizing filters, you can fix most of this error produced here, so that the transient gets cleaned up and it's not as messy anymore as it was. It's not possible to restore all the since the filter has cut, like brick wall filter has cut the transient into like narrow bandwidth, and the high frequency details of it are lost. But the error that is folded down there and that in the transient errors it causes can be fixed with these apodizing filters to large extent. So it's not a way to get back to same level as you get with DSD-256, but you can make most out of the Red Book content as much as possible. And that's the very difficult part also.
So independent what the source is, if it is already DSD, with a lower bitrate or BCM, the first step is always conversion to DSD, upsampling.
HQ player can output any format from any source format. So you can output PCM also. If you have R2R, this resistor ladder DAC, you can output PCM and you can play DSD sources converted to PCM for the ladder DAC.
But you always go over DSD?
No, not if you output PCM, then there's no conversion to the, it's staying. Then PCM stays in PCM, and then DSD is converted to PCM, and then for PCM output you get the PCM output. And for example, with R2R ladders have linearity problems, where the lowest bits are not correct in the value, so the low-level signal gets errors. HQ player has noise shapers designed to correct those errors. So you reduce the number of bits that are output. I measure the DA converter how much linear rates it has, and then I tell it in the manual or in the forum. And then you can tell HQ player that okay, it's for example 19-bit accurate or 17-bit or something. You set it up, and then you tell HQ player to upsample to highest possible PCM rate and apply this noise shaper. And then I have measurements that show that then the low-level distortion disappears. So then you get clean signal from these hardwire ladders. So my idea is just whatever the DA converter is to use DSP to produce the most correct result. And I also have now the DUC correction feature in the HQ player, where I measure some specific DUC model with special test signals, and then I create correction profile for HQ player that corrects the errors. For example, that some of the errors, not all, everything cannot be corrected, but some of the errors, for example, that the DUC analog stages produce, the output stage and the conversion stage. So it's similar, like somewhat similar to room correction, but it's more detailed and more advanced than room correction, but it does similar thing, but for the DA converter. So correcting the DA converter errors.
More questions?
As to the recording side, we cannot expect that due to the limitations of the DSD process, that the studios like to work on DSD. Even the ones that I know from the beginning, from 2000, 2001, really, you can say DSD enthusiasts, they realize that there are a lot of practical limitations working with DSD. So we have many change to working with the modern DXD possibilities in the Pyramix workstations and all that. What I found out, and this is a good development, there are thousands and thousands of analog tapes waiting to be transferred in DSD. But DSD recordings that we had at the beginning, with that real DSD machines, that won't be anymore. So it's great that you try to work on what all of us have, PCM files, because the availability of DSD files is also very limited. A native DSD is a platform where you buy it, and the problem is the copyright. So you download the DSD file that has no copyright. So it's, to us, to be honest enough, not one buys a DSD file and then copy it to 20 friends or 25 friends. That was the idea of the SACD, of course, with the watermarking and everything, to ensure that that there is some insurance for the artist and for the label and all that. So good that we have you trying to do the best of a limited format that PCM is, and there are lots of examples that PCM transfers to DSD are great, but there are also others.
Yeah, for this content copyright issue, it's the same for DSD and PCM.
Yeah.
So copying files, it's just a file, no matter what is in the file.
But
so
that was the beginning of DSD. The idea when we have a physical format finally, the Super Audio CD, then it's protected. But
yeah, now you can rip also those.
After 20 years,
Yeah. So
Hans?
the
Your question?
DRM is of course one aspect. For tools, I have the HQ Player Pro that is used by Tom Caulfield, for example, and we played last year some samples that were mixed by him in DSD using HQ Player Pro, and he has been doing quite a lot of these nowadays. You can get those from latest DSD.
Yeah.
And I think pure DSD label there. I could improve the tool, this production tool also. I had some plans to hook it to the Pyramix so that you could do all the editing, in Pyramix as you've done, and then you hit process and it doesn't process through Pyramix, but it's all through HQ Pro.
Which means if we have a good analog board, it comes out, goes to your input, and finally get a source from analog, and you can finally get the DSD file, right? Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, HQ Player Pro can do recording, but with normal HQ Player you can, for example, use the RME ADI 2 Pro, which is ADC and DA converter. You can use it to record in real time through ADC at DSD 256. Then, for example, if you have vinyl as source, you want to play like what I do at home when I play vinyls. From the phono preamp, I take input to ADI 2 Pro. It outputs DSD 256. I apply room correction, and it goes through another DAC at DSD 256. Or DSD 512 also, you can convert it up, but you can go do this in real time from analog input to analog output through HQ Player. And HQ Player can also take input from SPDIF, AES or USB. So a lot of people, so any USB source, for example, can be used.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jussi.
Thank you.